Good morning, 7th grade, afternoon, whenever you're watching this video. For me, it's very early in the morning. If you don't have your books, grab them. It's up to you as when you watch the videos read. By tomorrow, Friday, you will need to have read all the way to the end of 15.5. So read chapter 15 to the end of chapter 15.5. That's kind of my long-term goal for this week. And then tomorrow you'll have a quiz that goes over at least part of what you've read this week. So what I'm going to be talking about today is 15.5. So if you haven't finished reading 15.4, then wait until you've read that to watch this video. But 15.5. So, now things get just really crazy. We had talked yesterday about King Henry VIII. That was crazy enough with his 6 wives and him breaking with the English church, but he didn't really, breaking with the Catholic Church to make England a Protestant country, but wasn't really Protestant. King Henry VIII became ultimate ruler of the church as well as the political leader. Then his one son becomes king, King Edward. He becomes king when he's, grand total of 9. Mom's Protestant. So England was Protestant, truly Protestant during that time. He dies. His sister, would have been his half-sister, Mary, becomes queen. She wants England to be Catholic and kills 300 people, hence the reason she's known as Bloody Mary, to try to make England Catholic. That didn't work. She dies, and Elizabeth, another one of King Henry's daughters, becomes queen. She became the Queen of England at 25. And you can read through everything about her on page 172, including the fact that her half-sister, Bloody Mary, tried to have Elizabeth killed. Skipping over to page 173, for her remarkable character and extraordinary performance as ruler of England, Elizabeth I won the acclaim of her country and earned the affectionate nickname of Good Queen Bess. Elizabeth faced many problems, but in one way or another, they all had their roots in the religious problems of the time. According to a rumor, she didn't have any religious views one way or the other, but she was brought up Protestant, and after everything that Bloody Mary had gone through, it was very obvious that England wanted to be Protestant. But even though Elizabeth didn't really push for the country necessarily be one way or the other, there were English Catholics, and the English Catholics had encouragement and support of foreign powers, especially Philip II, the King of Spain. Got to keep in mind, to really understand everything that's going on in this time period, some countries were, you let them choose, some countries were die-hard Protestant, some were very, very Catholic. Spain, when you hear Spain at this time, think Catholic. And the root of a lot of problems is going to go back to this whole thing. Then we get to Mary, Queen of Scots. Now, you got to keep your Mary straight. You've got Mary, the Queen of Scotland, and you've got Bloody Mary. There are 2 different Marys. Now, this is where things get really nutsy here. Page 173. Mary Stuart was 1 week old. Tiny little baby when she becomes queen. Yeah, she was queen. She's the one she was destined to be the Queen of the Scots, the Queen of Scotland. It had been agreed that Mary Stuart would marry the son of Henry VIII, making the future Edward VI of England also the future King of Scotland. So the plan was that when the infant queen grows up, she's going to marry the King of England, uniting England and Scotland. Well, first of all, Edward dies before that can happen. Because remember, he became king when he was 9. Second of all, there's another major problem here. That's apparently, I guess, Dad's plan. Because Mom is Mary of Guise. She's French. And she does not, her close associate is Cardinal David Beaton. Now remember, a cardinal is a Catholic church leader. They wanted to keep Scotland Catholic. So, remember, Edward was a Protestant king of England. So they realized that if this whole marriage takes place, then Scotland is going to become Protestant, and they want to keep Scotland Catholic. So their solution is to send Mary to France, because remember, mom's French, to be brought up in the court of the king, and there be prepared for marriage to the king's oldest son, and heir to the throne of France, combining France and Scotland and keeping Scotland Catholic. The Scottish Reformation opened violently with the execution of preachers who urged reform. John Knox, the outstanding leader of the Scottish Reformation, was captured at the castle of St. Andrews by Scottish and French troops and forced to serve as a slave. King Edward VI of England finally secured his release and brought him to England, where Knox promoted the Protestant cause. But then Edward dies, and Bloody Mary comes to the throne. So Knox and other Protestant leaders have to leave. So they go to Switzerland, because Switzerland, remember, is neutral country. So they head to Geneva, Switzerland, where John Calvin made him minister of the growing congregation of English Protestants who went to Switzerland to live in exile, but so Bloody Mary wouldn't kill them. In 1559, the Scottish Protestants called Knox home to lead them. By now, Mary, Queen of Scots, was married to Francis II, who had become King of France. As Queen Regent, in other words, the mother of Mary, Mary of Guise planned to depose Elizabeth, and in other words, kick Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, off the throne, and make her daughter, Mary Stuart, the Queen of England, because they're cousins. So if Elizabeth dies with no children, and there's no other children of King Henry VIII, then we go to cousins, which means if Elizabeth dies, Mary Stuart, the Queen of Scotland, would become the Queen of England as well. So Mary Stuart's mom's plan, which Mary Stuart's mom is also a Mary, that's not at all confusing, plans to try to get rid of Elizabeth. So they can get control of England and make England a Catholic country. Knox and his followers, under heavy attack by French mercenaries would be soldiers for hire, appealed to Queen Elizabeth, urging that she intervene for herself in England. Elizabeth responded by sending 10,000 troops to Scotland. This act, plus the death of Mary of Guise, Mary Stuart's mom, caused the French to give up. By treaty, the French agreed to withdraw their troops, and the English did likewise. The Scottish Protestants were left in control, and the Scottish Parliament set up an independent Church of Scotland, the Scottish Presbyterian Church. When Mary comes back from France to Scotland, after her husband dies, she found herself the Catholic queen of a Protestant country. Over the years, she and John Knox locked horns or argued on a number of occasions, especially when she attempted to marry the son of King Philip II of Spain. The Scots, having had enough of Mary's mischief, finally imprisoned her and forced her to give up her throne in favor of her infant son, James VI. And so it goes on. The turbulence of, typical turbulence of Scottish politics continued. Then you go to the Netherlands. King Philip II of Spain was determined to rule the world on behalf of the Roman Church. Like I said, all of this political wars and conflict ties back to religion. So, King Philip II of Spain was determined to rule the world on behalf of the Roman Catholic Church. Of course, the Protestant England stood in his way. Events in the Netherlands soon made it clear how much of an obstacle England really was. When Philip inherited the Netherlands from his father, Charles V, friction started immediately. To the people of the Netherlands, Philip was first and foremost a Spaniard, the King of Spain. Adding to this, there were many Protestants in the Netherlands or in Holland. The Protestant Reformation had arrived there early, and the Netherlands had also become a place of refuge for Protestants who had to leave other places or be killed. In 1566, 200 nobles formed a league to get rid of Spanish influence in the Netherlands. This league asked Philip not to use the Spanish Inquisition. Remember the Inquisition, the court that would try people for heresy, for not being Catholic. When Philip refused the request, the Dutch people decided to defend themselves against Spain and the Roman Church. Philip responded by sending in more Spanish troops led by the Spanish Duke of Alva. Alva set up a council, which came to be known as the Council of Blood because of the brutal way it treated the people of the Netherlands. One noble who lost his estate, William the Silent, the Prince of Orange, Orange being an area, became the leader of the repressed Dutch patriots. Dutch Protestants formed the Dutch Reformed Church. On land and on sea, though vastly outmanned and outgunned, the Dutch fought on. Dutch self-defense reached its height in 1579 when the 10 northern provinces joined together. 2 years later, they declared the Netherlands to be independent of Spain. The Dutch Declaration of Independence, however, only hardened the tyrant's heart, and the fighting continued. Dutch suffered a severe blow when a Spanish agent assassinated the William of Orange, the father of his country as he was known. Skipping down to England prepares for war. In 1586, Elizabeth sent about 6,000 troops to Netherlands. For some time, she had realized that if Spain got a hold of the Netherlands, England would be next. So she realizes it's better for England if they are able to defeat Spain and keep them from being able to get the Netherlands. Spain's greatest strength, I can speak, was on the sea. To match it, the Queen employed John Hawkins to build up the English fleet. He designed the English ships to be very fast, weather any seas and any wind, to deliver crushing shots. That's where we get Sir Francis Drake. He comes in at this point. Now, hopefully, there's like this ding light bulb going on. This is a dude we've talked about in American history last year in 6th grade, but I'm pretty sure he was also in the 4th grade history book, because Sir Francis Drake is the dude who helped settle some colonies over here in America. He's also the guy who was part of the Spanish Armada. We've talked about he ties into American history as well as English history. So it goes on talking about Sir Francis Drake, and the war that's going on to free, Holland. Skipping. Spain prepares for war. By May 1588, Philip had prepared a fleet called the Armada in Spanish. It consisted of 130 ships, 2,500 guns, and more than 30,000 men, including 180 friars and priests, Catholic. Perhaps the greatest naval force the world had seen, this invincible armada. You got to know, when you say invincible, it's going to turn out to be defeatable, as it was soon known, sailed forth. And so then it goes on and it talks about how the Spanish Armada ended up, the invincible Spanish Armada ends up being defeated. Because even though their ships were bigger, England's was faster. Also, the weather was on the side of the English. And it goes on to say, the Armada missed a golden opportunity to trap So anyway, so it goes on to talk about how they got defeated. And it ends with saying Spain recovered in a material sense, but its morale was destroyed. Its glory gone, Spain began to decline in nearly every matter that determines the greatness of a nation. Which is why they no longer tried as hard to settle over here in the New World, which is why we're, sitting in a Christian school, not a Catholic school, speaking English, not Spanish. That's kind of an overstatement, but if Spain had won, things might have gone different as far as settling of the New World. And then it ends up with the Elizabethan age, talking about, as for England, the country which was naturally grateful to God for the victory. English had secured their independence and their Protestant Reformation by defeating the most powerful country in the world. And furthermore, they had not lost a single ship and scarcely 100 men. Goes on to talk about how until 1603, England basked in the sunlight of glory under good Queen Bess. Greatness radiated from the throne, from politics to poetry. Whether in the real drama of war and the make-believe drama of a theater stage, the Elizabethan age shines in English history and in the history of the world. In a sense, England had its own Renaissance. During this time, William Shakespeare, who they call perhaps the greatest writer the world has ever known, begins his 20-year career as a playwright. And then it ends with just kind of summing everything up. End of an age. Elizabeth was such a good queen that the people of England did not at first realize the consequences of the dreamlike allegory in which they lived. Elizabeth was a strong monarch, but she wasn't a tyrant. So she had the good balance of being strong and realizing when she needed to step up and do something, like defeat the Spanish Armada, versus when she needed to let the people have their freedom. She seems to have truly loved her people and governed with their best interest in mind. After 45 years as Queen of England, Elizabeth made this last speech. Thou, God, hath raised me high, yet I count this the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves. I have cause to wish nothing more than to content the subject, which is a duty that I owe. The English Reformation, started by Henry VIII, had stopped short of a complete return to biblical Christianity. An all-powerful pope had been exchanged for an absolute monarch, but it was a step in the right direction. England's defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 assured her independence of Rome for once and for all. Basically, the Roman Catholic Church. When they say Rome, there is what they mean. As one historian has said, England's victory was the final turning point in the great duel between Protestantism and Romanism. It not only assured England and Scotland, but Holland, North Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway to the Protestant cause. By the end of the Elizabethan age, England's struggle for freedom was well underway. So basically, Elizabeth was a really, really good queen. England is now a Protestant country, but it's not quite there yet. But it's a Protestant country now. Still lots of religious turmoil / political turmoil, which we'll read about next week. I will not make a video tomorrow, because tomorrow you're just going to finish reading the rest of 15.5, because I know that was a long section and this is a long video, and then you'll have a quiz tomorrow. So see you in Bible tomorrow, in history next week. Do not be forgetting about literature. Trying to keep literature kind of normal, which means that today, Friday's assignment was due. I'll assign you something new today that is due tomorrow. See y'all.